This segment looks at relevant costs in a seller process further decision. Businesses are often faced with the decision to sell partially completed products or to process them on to full completion. As a general rule, companies should only process products further if the incremental revenues or the additional revenues exceed the incremental costs or the additional costs of processing. For example, ABC has 40,000 units of partially finished product Q. The costs incurred to process to date are $30,000. Those 40,000 unfinished units can be sold as is for $50,000, or they can be processed further to produce finished products X, Y, and Z. The additional processing will cost $80,000 and result in the following revenues. If they process further and end up with X, Y, and Z, they would be able to sell each of those products for this unit price, the number of units they would be able to produce, and the revenues that would come from selling those further processed products. There will be 2,000 units of spoilage, which we would not be able to sell, so there would be no revenues. So the additional units we would be able to create by processing further will result in revenues of $220,000. So recall that the company would receive $50,000 if they were to go ahead and sell product Q after they'd reached that selling point. So the incremental revenue from processing further is the additional revenue beyond what they could sell it for prior to the process further decision point. So the additional revenues of $220 minus the $50,000, the incremental revenues are $170,000. The incremental cost of processing is $80,000. Should ABC go ahead and sell product Q as is, or continue the processing to get to products X, Y, and Z? Looking at the additional revenues of $220, the incremental cost of $80, because the incremental revenues exceed the incremental costs, ABC should continue processing. That $30,000 cost that they incurred to process to get to the point of having product Q is a sunk cost, because regardless of whether they decide to sell or process further, the $30,000 processing cost to get to the point of having Q will happen regardless. It is sunk, and it is not relevant to the decision of whether to sell as is or process further.